months. They have been talking about what they have termed as significant losses on the Russian side. And in the midst of that, this particular significant visit by US President Joe Biden speaks a lot. United States of America also on its own has spoken about the kind of support that it is giving to the Ukraine. Time and again, it's been happening since the time, in fact, the latter part of the war by Russia against Ukraine.
All right. I believe, just before I answer your question,
yes.
I believe Sanjay Suri, my colleague, is also joining us. Sanjay, we're seeing these photographs, Biden and Zelensky in downtown Kyiv. What does this moment mean? What is this visit of the American president, the first time he's touched down in Kyiv after this war began? What may this mean in the overall context of this war?
Moment, it is a pivotal moment. This is deeply, deeply significant. We had word earlier that President Biden will visit Poland, but it would have been awkward for him to have come to Warsaw and then gone away. That is when every one world leader, certainly major Western European leaders, have come to Kyiv. Former Prime Minister Boris Johnson, Prime Minister Sunak, Chancellor Scholz, the President Macron, they've all been to Kyiv. It would have been very awkward for Biden to come and return from Warsaw. Always on cards that he would come to Kyiv, and of course, for security reasons, that could never have been announced. And therefore, this is now a very strong message to Putin on the eve of the anniversary of the invasion. Just when the Russian momentum, this so-called spring offensive, is building up, we are seeing heavy fighting all along the Eastern Front already. This is now a message to Putin that he cannot hope to advance and hope that the Americans will stand by and do nothing. The Americans have taken the lead, and this is a signal that they will do and are prepared to do very much more than they have done so far. A very, very hugely significant moment. This is a massive moment in this war.
Sanjay, just put this also into context for our viewers. This is the week of the one-year anniversary of this war. On Friday this week, it'll be exactly a year to the day since this war began. How is this visit coming as it does on that very week of the one-year anniversary of this war? How is this going to be read, particularly in Moscow? Definitely. How is it going to be viewed in London and Paris and Beijing?
Well, rather differently across these four places that you mentioned. In London and Paris, of course, it will be seen as hugely encouraging. In Beijing, they will look at it with some worry. We've had some indications from the US Secretary of State that China could be preparing to arm Russia in this invasion. That will send a signal to China that they had better watch it. The US has said so in so many words, but really words cannot substitute the significance of the scenes we are seeing now in Kyiv. This is a very strong message, as strong as it gets, in the middle of a danger zone, in the midst of an air alarm that has gone off in Kyiv. We have President Biden walking down, doing a walkabout in the central square in Kyiv, along with President Zelensky. How much more potent a message could there possibly be? And of course, of all these four cities you mentioned, no place is more significant than Moscow. They will view this with nervousness, even with trepidation. Putin has been making these grand threats. Most people believe, and we hope they believe correctly, that these are empty threats of taking the nuclear option. This is going to send a very strong message to Putin about that. Just a few days back, we had the US launching an ICBM, an unarmed ICBM, into the Pacific, with the chief of their world force military saying that the US is ready to defend itself and its allies at a moment's notice. We've had many messages now from the US. This is the strongest so far, the clearest message. And really, this ought to get Putin worried. Certainly, it would get Putin's closest advisors worried. And
absolutely. Sanjay, I request you to stay on with us. We also have our colleague Abhishek Jha. But before I come to you, Abhishek, let me bring in Robinder Sachdeva as a foreign affairs expert on the broadcast. Mr. Sachdeva, thank you so much. First of all, how do you read this very, very significant visit by the US president?
Thank you so much. I think your colleague earlier has just kind of laid out the various aspects. What I would say is that, you see, Biden is cementing himself as the tallest leader of the Western alliance since the Second World War. A war leader, right? Since the Second World War, there has never been a war of this scale. okay, which has been led by America. So Biden is kind of, positioning himself as a leader of that stature. That since Second World War, the tallest Western leader, Joe Biden. Okay, that's one. Secondly, yes, Poland being the, being a frontline state, so Biden's visit there comes with all its, associated signals, and these are not only signals. I mean, there's a reality or substance to it also, that the U.S. is pumping in money and arms and the entire Western alliance, and the U.S. is the one leading them, right? U.S. is the one who has marshaled this alliance. Otherwise, maybe the NATO and the EU would have been, just scraping around or discussing what to do, etc. It's the U.S. which took the leadership, or let's say it's the U.S. who has led this entire campaign on behalf of Ukraine. So Biden being in Poland is a strong statement, and as our earlier speaker was saying, that it is a message for Putin. But I think Putin already has that message, or has got that message, that America is hell-bent upon ensuring, along with Europe, that Russia will become a pygmy. A pygmy in terms of its military power, a pygmy in terms of its economic power, and a pygmy also in terms of its industry. And so that's one dimension of this whole thing. And the second thing is the ground war in Ukraine. As long as Zelensky keeps on performing with the limited or whatever next higher level weapons he's given and turns in a good, return, he gets the next level, right? If you look back, Javelin Stingers were the first, shoulder fired given, or in fact, even the very first was Zelensky, leave Kyiv, we will give you asylum in Germany. He said, no, okay, you take Javelins. They did well with the Javelins. Okay, then he started asking for long range, let's say, HIMARS or HIMARS. Okay, no. Okay, take 15, perform and show. They performed well with the HIMARS. Okay, now, tanks. So with each, with each stage of the Ukrainian war, the commitment of the U.S. and the NATO is getting deeper and deeper. And that is depending upon, without doubt, the performance of the Ukrainian military on the ground and the dismal performance of the Russians.
So, Rubinder, do you think this is also going to find resonance in that speech that we all are looking forward to, considering Joe Biden all set to hail NATO's efforts to unprecedentedly help Ukraine in the efforts of war against Russia?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Biden has actually, has strengthened NATO. You have Sweden and Finland, two new entities joining NATO also. And the European Union so far, before this Ukraine war, European Union was fine, some multilateral organization. Nobody knew or cared much about EU. Now, suddenly, EU has also assumed an importance, right? So, all of this strengthening of Europe, is something for which America can take credit, and this would be reflected. We, Europe, if you listen to all of the statements now, right? The European values, we will not tolerate an attack on European values, etc. So the idea of Europe has become more, solidified now.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Rubinder. I'm going back to my colleague Sanjay Suri, who's joining us live from Kyiv in Ukraine. Sanjay, if we juxtapose the two visits, one by the then UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson and today of the US President Joe Biden, how does one read this?
Well, Boris Johnson really started this. To give him credit, he has taken the lead in the world in support of Ukraine. He has not minced words. He has not cut down on support. He took an aggressive position, and that lead has been followed by others. Boris Johnson really has taken the lead. Sunak has been following in his footsteps, as have the leaders of France, Germany, and other countries. The fact is that the US is the one that really matters more than any other. The extent of support that the US has given to Ukraine is by far very much more than anyone else has given and possibly could. It is US weaponry that has changed the course of the war. It is US Javelin missiles, followed by the HIMARS systems, and now the Patriot air defense systems that really have strengthened Ukraine. They've given the technological edge to the Ukrainian military, to which the Russians have had no answer. These missiles, these American missiles, some of them simply just shoulder-mounted stuff, have blown Russian tanks to bits. The uh, image, apart from everything else, of the Russian military power has been shattered. Their potential export market has been shattered. This now is a moment when the message will go home very firmly to Putin that he's not going to win this war, that he will have no option but to retreat further. Already, the Russian troops have retreated from more than half of the areas they had occupied. They've been driven back from Kyiv, from Kharkiv, from Kherson, from several towns in the Donbas region in the east, around Donetsk and Luhansk. So the Russians are on the retreat. There is now a new offensive from Russia underway. It is crawling. It is not getting very far. It is not turning out to be very effective at all. The threat is that from Putin repeatedly that he may hit the nuclear button. But that is the message now that Biden is driving home, that if Russia does not stop, the US will not stop, and not stop to at any length, at any point, in the extent of the support it will give to Ukraine.
Absolutely. Sanjay, thank you so much for that. Taking this also to my colleague Abhishek, who continues to be with us. Abhishek, the fact that all of this is obviously signifying that Russia is being further pushed into a corner, given the fact that even the Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky has said that even though it has been very, very difficult a situation for Ukraine, they are managing to what he has termed as breaking the invader.
Of course, and if we say, Sanjay Suri was saying, that this is the strongest possible solidarity, expression of solidarity that NATO and USA could give to Ukraine and its people in terms of assurance that they have been and they will be standing by the side of Ukraine in their cause, in their fight against Russian forces. And with President Biden's this sudden and surprising visit, there is surely a shocking wave is going to be in Moscow because even now, even to the morning, we were reading the presidential schedule of Joe Biden, and it was said that he is going to take off from USA and he was supposed to reach Poland tomorrow, somewhere in afternoon, and then probably he would have addressed some gathering or some function in Warsaw. But it looks like this was all just a proxy, and the real intention was to ensure that President Biden reaches Kyiv securely. And we have seen today how comfortably he was walking alongside President Zelensky in the central square of Kyiv. So clearly, it's not just the money that USA and NATO are giving to Ukraine, or the ammunition, arms, or the economic sanction or portion that they are doing against Russia, but they are literally standing by the side of Ukrainian people. And with today's visit of President Joe Biden, it is very much clear that the war which Russia has started sort of against Ukraine, so now Ukraine is no more a minnow in this war against the mighty military establishment of Russia, but it has got a lot of support from NATO and allies and USA also as well.
Absolutely. And Abhishek, Ukraine, Kiev especially, is no stranger to official visits. However, this becomes very, very significant because even in the heart of that entire warlike situation that continues to actually be there between Russia and Ukraine, this particular visit has been made by the US president, makes it very, very significant. One of the important moments in his own presidency, considering we are just talking about February 24th, when this entire that invasion of Russia on Ukraine is going to complete a year.
And with this completion of 1 year, we were expecting a lot of visit or a lot of high-level delegation to happen in Kyiv to express solidarity with the Ukrainian side. Because we have been talking to various envoys in Delhi of European Union or European countries, and they have all said that this war will go on until and unless Russia does not stop its unjustified and illogical and illegal war against Ukraine. So clearly, as the war will prolong for a very long time now, because now we have seen a lot of commitments coming from NATO and USA about this tank, ammunition, tanks, and training to Ukrainian military officers. So there is clearly a longer road.
Or there seemed to be a problem with that audio link that Sanjay, in fact, Abhishek has with us. We'll try and re-establish that audio connection and get Abhishek or Sanjay back with us on the broadcast. However, this is what we are learning. The visuals of US President Joe Biden along with the Ukrainian Premier Volodymyr Zelensky in Kyiv, in the heart of Ukraine. That's a very, very important visit, as President Joe Biden is in fact in Ukraine to mark 1 year of Russia's invasion to Ukraine. It's important, a very significant visit by US President Joe Biden. Remember, February 24th is when the Russian invasion to Ukraine marks 1 year. And this is going to be seen as a clear messaging by Joe Biden to his Russian counterpart, Vladimir Putin, when he goes on to speak in Warsaw next week, in a few days from now, and he will be hailing NATO's unprecedented effort to help the Ukrainians and also lend ample lot of support to Ukraine against Russia. Now, as per the White House, we are being told that President Joe Biden is going to be giving that speech in Poland. Remember, this is a key US ally and fulcrum of vast efforts to arm Ukraine and also to receive refugees. That's an important aspect of it. We are all waiting for what that speech is going to be by the US president in Poland, and all eyes are on the kind of messaging that will be sent out through that. Taking this across to Sanjay Suri, who is live with us from Kyiv. Sanjay, all eyes on that big speech by US President Joe Biden.
The big speech, of course, would come in due course, and all eyes are on it. But the movements and the visit by President Biden has spoken louder than any speech could. We've had a speech, and more speeches are run-of-the-mill stuff. This is now quite exceptional, quite out of the ordinary, and no speech could even fractionally convey the import of this visit from President Biden. And clearly, if there is somebody who is watching this and is very worried, it will be President Putin. This is now a very, very firm signal of very, very emphatic support to Ukraine, that this support will not stop at anything, and it will go as far as it needs to, and for as long as it takes. President Biden has said this, all Western European leaders have said this. This demonstrates this. And clearly, this war is going to now take a new turn. We have a new offensive from Russian forces underway, which is not getting very far. It is not succeeding very well. And now that we have the strong support expressed by President Biden through this visit, this will certainly be followed not just by the major speech, but by a major new boost to weaponry. There is some indication that there will be a pledge made for fighter jets to Ukraine that President Zelensky has long been seeking, and very, very firmly and very strenuously of late. We are going to see very much more than a speech now following this visit.
Absolutely. And Sanjay, like you rightly said, this pretty much underscores America's huge support to Ukraine, along with that kind of weaponry support that Ukraine has been seeking, and one that America promises to give Ukraine, one that America has in fact given. This becomes very, very important and significant. And considering we are talking about the all right, we are getting some live shots. Let's cut across live to that.
Ukraine. We can be assured that there were special forces there US forces in very close proximity to the president there to...
We've seen these visits, haven't we? But, you know, this is obviously on a different level with the US president arriving.
Exactly. Sanjay, as I was mentioning, this pretty much is a very, very significant visit. This underscores the kind of support that America has offered to the Ukraine. Ukraine pretty much cannot afford to lose this war. It's a country that will cease to be if at all that happens. And this becomes very significant. The kind of support that NATO has shown now with the US president's arrival in Kyiv really speaks for itself. Sanjay, if you can hear me. All right, we don't seem to have Sanjay at the moment. We'll try and re-establish that connection. Meanwhile, taking that same question to my colleague Abhishek Jha, who also continues to be with us on the broadcast. Abhishek, like I was mentioning, this is a war that Ukraine cannot lose, and the kind of support that it is receiving, especially now that Joe Biden's arrival really speaks for America's strong support to Ukraine, really says it all.
So, as you were mentioning that this is Ukraine were to stop this war, it will be a question of its very existence. And this is the same sentiment that European Union envoy in Delhi has expressed a couple of days ago when we were having a conversation with him, that for Russia to stop the war, it has to stop its illegal invasion, which has been unjustified and which is an illegal trying to encroach, and annex that area from Ukraine. But for Ukraine, if it were to stop this war, it will lose its sovereignty, it will lose its nation hood. So clearly, Ukraine cannot afford to stop this war, and especially the kind of support that is now being poured to Ukraine in terms of military, financial assistance. Millions of refugees who have fled from Ukrainian cities, who have been under the shellings and attacks by the Russian forces, they have found shelters and home in neighboring European countries. So clearly, Ukraine is being taken care of by the NATO and EU as very much their own. Remember, Ukraine is not part of EU or is not part of even NATO, but the kind of support it has got from European Union or NATO is nothing less than they would be, extending to any member country of the union. So clearly, support and today's visit of President Biden is a utmost important significance that USA will stand by Ukraine. And now we are also learning that reports which says that Ukraine may get some of the fighter jets from USA. Until a few weeks ago, there were deliberation happening between USA and other NATO members, where USA was not very much keen and agreeing to the fact that it should be supplying Abraham tank to Ukraine. But now those tanks have been agreed upon, Leopard tanks have been agreed upon, Challenger tanks have been agreed upon. Now it looks like some fighter jets will also be committed to Ukraine. And if that happens, then clearly this war that is happening in Ukraine will have, severity of it will increase, and the long haul that we are anticipating will also go on for a very long time.
Right, Abhishek. Thank you so much for that. In fact, joining us is also Russian journalist Tatiana Kokoreva. Tatiana, thank you so much for being a part of this discussion. First of all, how are people in the high offices in Russia really reading this visit by US President Joe Biden in Kyiv, in Ukraine?
Good afternoon to you too. Well, you're asking questions to which, journalists so far would not be able to respond, because there has been no official reaction as far as I've seen, at least. But, the message behind this visit is very clear, just as much as any and everything that the U.S. has done so far. And the message is that the U.S. does not want any end to this conflict.
Absolutely. And Tatiana, you rightfully mentioned. However, let's actually talk about the situation when it comes to this war between Russia and Ukraine. Ukraine has time and again spoken about the kind of difficulties that Russian forces are now having to see in Ukraine. They talk about actually going ahead and pushing the invader back. Would you be able to actually throw light of any of those details, considering he has gone on record and spoken about the resistance that the Russian forces have been met with in Ukraine?
Well, look, if you look at the Ukrainian media from the very beginning, they've been putting out information that had nothing to do with reality. And unfortunately, that trend continues and will not cease in any time soon. And it's a very simple, narrative that they're pushing forward. And I guess that it's understandable because, they need to keep the spirits high in the country. However, that does not explain or justify the level of misinformation that they're putting out into the world. It's the same story. If you remember when during all of the advances that Russian forces, including Wagner forces, have made in eastern Ukraine, or right now, I should say, actually, in Russian territory, at the very same time, the Ukrainian media would also say that, no, this is not true, this is not happening, when we had actual images of, cities being liberated and forces moving forward. So unfortunately, that trend, I don't see an end to this. And if you want to see a clearer picture, you would have to follow Russian media as much as anything else. Because there is
I understand the point that you're making. I'm really sorry to interrupt you, but I really want to understand this. Don't you think this kind of symbolism and these kind of visits and the kind of NATO support that Ukraine is getting will push Russia to a corner? And leave aside the resistance you're talking about, that's a particular narrative that's coming in from Ukraine. But what is on ground, coming in from world leaders, also speaks for itself. Don't you think, Tatiana?
Well, look, we've been having that discussion, if I'm not mistaken, almost for a year now, and the question remains the same. We're always talking about backing Russia into the corner, and I think that this narrative in itself is very wrongful. We're not in a corner, and we'll never be in the corner, because the support, in terms of words and visits, it's the one thing, but the other thing, you've seen the numbers, you've seen the number of military supplies. From what it feels like right now, it feels like the NATO countries and the US especially, they are supporting Ukraine, but they're supporting Ukraine to an end that this conflict just continues on and on. So the issue here is to kind of prolong it and to milk this conflict as long as possible. Will it actually work? Well, I mean, I don't think I'm equipped to make this sort of prediction. For now, if you look at the maps, and this would be the most accurate depiction of the situation on the ground, and the map does not lie. I mean, if it were that big a deal, then, that conflict had already been moved much, much closer to the old border, which it's not. And Russian forces continue to advance.
Okay. Tatiana, we leave the conversation there. Thanks a lot for joining us here on CNN News 18. Good evening to all our viewers. Thanks a lot for staying with us. In a move that will have massive ripples, United States President Joe Biden has arrived in Ukraine's capital, Kyiv. This is Joe Biden's surprise visit to underscore American support for President Zelensky and his efforts against Russia. Now, this also comes just days before the first anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The trip marks the first time President Joe Biden has traveled to Ukraine as president. It may also be noted that Joe Biden has announced a new military package for Ukraine worth $500 million. The package will include more military equipment, including artillery ammunition, more javelins and howitzers as well. We'll connect with our colleagues in just a bit. CNN News 18, Sanjay Suri, in fact, is in Ukraine. He will be joining us shortly from Kyiv. Our colleague Abhishek Jha is also tracking all these developments very, very closely. As we said, this unscheduled surprise visit is going to have a lot of global ramifications and ripples as well. Look at the tweet that has been put out by President Joe Biden. It says, and I'm quoting, "As we approach the anniversary of Russia's brutal invasion of Ukraine, I am in Kyiv today to meet with President Zelensky and reaffirm our unwavering commitment to Ukraine's democracy, sovereignty and territorial integrity." The messaging that is being sent out by the United States in their support to Ukraine is going to be very crucial. President Biden in his tweet further goes on to say, when Putin launched his invasion nearly 1 year ago, he thought Ukraine was weak and the West was divided.
What can I say? I really appreciate that President Biden, American society, being from the very beginning of this tragedy, from the very beginning of this full-scale war, from the first days being together with us. First phone call of support was from White House to Ukraine. And thank you for your leadership. Thanks bipartisan support. Thanks Congress. I think that is a historical moment for our country and very important. Today we'll speak detailedly about the situation on the battlefield. But I think almost we'll speak about people, about Ukrainians, about Americans. I think that is huge and so difficult period for societies, and what we have to do to stop the war, to have success in this war, to make Ukraine more stronger, and how to win this year. You're very welcome, Mr. President. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me. Presumptuous of me to say this, but I thought it was important that the President of the United States be here the day the attack began. Because as the President remember, I was warning the world that he was going to attack. I was certain of it. And I thought it was critical that there would not be any doubt, none whatsoever, about U.S. support for Ukraine in their war against the brutal attack by Russia. You know, it's good to be back in Kyiv. I was telling the President, one of my newer staff members on the flight from Washington into Poland asked me how many times I've been to Kyiv. And I had to stop and think, it's my 8th trip. And much has changed. Much of it bad with the invasion, but also the Ukrainian people have stepped up in a way that few people ever have in their own defense, and have apparently also embraced the notions of democracy. No longer discussions about whether or not certain privileged people have control. And, you know, and I bring greetings and goodwill from the members of Congress, who had a very good impression, as you know, when you spoke there last. And for all the disagreement we have in our Congress on some issues, there is significant agreement on support for Ukraine. Because this is so much larger than just Ukraine. It's about freedom and democracy in Europe. It's about freedom and democracy writ large. And all the American people, I know that so many have kept the Ukrainian people, particularly women and children, in their prayers, seeing what's happening. They can't fathom the idea of the shelling at night, the shelling of everything from orphanages to schools to the like. It's barbaric. And I'm here to show our unwavering support for the nation's independence, their sovereignty, and territorial integrity. And today, I hope we're going to have a chance to discuss how the United States and our allies, by keeping constant contact with and our partners, can most effectively support you and your cause, Mr. President. And I look forward to discussing all of this and then addressing the world with you afterwards. But again, the admiration for the people of Ukraine, ordinary, hard-working citizens who were never trained to be military. The way they've stepped up is just is beyond heroic, and the whole world is looking. The whole world.
Okay, we're leaving. We're walking out. Press, we're walking out. We're walking out.
Well, there we heard from both the leaders for the first time ever since you had US President Joe Biden there landing in Ukraine. President Zelensky there thanking President Joe Biden for the United States' unwavering support. But what was crucial to note were the words that we heard from President Joe Biden, who said this is not just a gesture that the United States is extending towards Ukraine, but all of this boils down to the freedom of democracy. Let's listen in to what the leaders had to say.
United States of America, Joe Biden. Заява президента України.
Дуже дякую. Шановний пане президенте, шановні пані та панове, журналісти, шановні присутні, шановна команда.
The team of President Biden, I'm very happy to welcome you in Ukraine. It is a great honor for me and for all of us. We have just had negotiations with the President of the United States in the vis-a-vis format, and then we had a wide discussion with the involvement of our teams. These conversations brings us closer to the victory, and we hope that this year, the 2023, will become a year of victory. This unprovoked and criminal Russia's war against Ukraine and against the whole world and democratic world has to end with liberating the whole of Ukraine's territory from Russia's occupation and the solid guarantees of the long-term security for our country as well as the Europe and the whole world. Right now, in Ukraine, the destiny of the international order based on international order is decided. And we, together with the President Biden and our allies and partners, have to continue doing everything possible so that the democratic world would win in this historic fight. Ukrainian remember the focus, the attention, the attitude of President Biden and the United States to every single Ukrainian, to Ukraine. We remain constantly in communication with the President of the United States over the course of this large-scale war, and this is the first visit over 15 years. And this is really the most important visit or the whole history of Ukraine-US relationship. This is the visit in this most difficult period for Ukraine, when Ukraine is fighting for our own liberty, for the liberties of the world. And this underlines the results that we have already achieved and what sort of historic achievements we might gain all together with the whole world, with the United States, with Europe. And today our negotiations were very fruitful. They were very important and crucial, and as has become traditional in relationship between our countries, I would like to extend words of gratitude personally to Mr. President Biden and to his team, to the Congress, to all the US people, and I thank you for this level of Ukraine-US cooperation. And this week will be marking 1 year of our fight against Russia's aggression. So it's very symbolic that we solidify our resilience through 2 meetings with the President of Ukraine, my visit in December and the visit of the Mr. President of the United States to Kyiv today. The results of this visit will surely be seen and will surely have a reflection on the battlefield and in liberating our territories. The decision of the United States on Abrams tanks for Ukraine has already presented a foundation for establishing a tank coalition, and it's of historic importance in many other aspects, more specifically in air defense, in Patriots, for the defense of our cities. Now, this is a very fundamental and crucial reinforcement of our capacities. We've also talked about long-range weapons and the weapons that may still be supplied to Ukraine, even though it wasn't supplied before. I know, Mr. President, that there will be a very significant package of security support to Ukraine, and currently it will serve as a clear signal that Russia's attempts of revanche will have no chance, and that we will together defend our cities and citizens from Russia's terror, will have more impetus towards our victory. And today we have yet again underlined that we have our common vision with regards to the perspectives of this war. We have coordinated the follow-on pressure on the terrorist state. We are working hard on the reinforcement of sanctions, both bilaterally and in the form of G7, which is very important. We have common vision on the content of many aspects of our peace formula, because it's security elements as well as the tasks to restore the UN Charter to its full capacity and to defend the international rule-based order. That's a common, a joint task for all the countries that are interested in the international security. The rebuilding and the recovery of justice is also very important for all those who was affected by the Russian terror, by the Russian war, and the aggressor has to take responsibility for the aggression and to reimburse all the damages. I thank to the President of the United States for supporting our work on restoring the justice, more specifically in the work of all of our institutions in that area, and we believe there's no alternatives to the establishment of the special tribunal. This is the position of of Ukraine, and we shall support this position. And I would really like the United States to be engaged in the implementation of our peace formula, because its implementation would mean a reinforcement of global stability and the predictability of international relations. And we have some achievements in this area already this week in New York, together with the United States of America. And over 60 other countries will be submitting for the consideration of the UN General Assembly of the draft resolution on supporting peace in Ukraine. And on the eve of the 24th of February, we believe that the approval of this resolution would be a very significant evidence to the fact that the terrorist state would never break a civilized country. And I think we are also opening a special tablet dedicated to the President Biden. The first call at the night of the 24th of February took place with the United States, and since that time we had conversations, and there was very significant attention to RFI, to the protection of Ukraine's democracy. Besides, there's the personal contribution in President Biden in solidifying the liberty and democracy in the world. This will be remembered eternally, and Ukraine is grateful to you, Mr. President, to all the US citizens, to all those who cherish freedom just as we cherish them. Glory to our warriors, glory to our allies, and glory to Ukraine.
Of the United States of America.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. You know, it was 1 year ago this week that we spoke on the telephone, Mr. President. It was very late at night in Washington, very early in the morning here in Kyiv. Russian planes were in the air and tanks were rolling across your border. You told me that you could hear the explosions in the background. I'll never forget that. And the world was about to change. I remember it vividly, because I asked you next, I asked you, what is there, Mr. President? What can I do for you? How can I be of help? And I don't know if you remember what you said to me, but you said, and I quote, "Gather the leaders of the world, ask them to support Ukraine." Gather the leaders of the world and ask them to support Ukraine. And you said that you didn't know when we'd be able to speak again. That dark night, 1 year ago, the world was literally at the time bracing for the fall of Kyiv. Seems like a lot longer ago than a year, but think back to that year. Perhaps even the end of Ukraine. You know, 1 year later, Kyiv stands, and Ukraine stands. Democracy stands. The Americans stand with you, and the world stands with you. Kyiv has captured a part of my heart, I must say. I've come here 6 times as vice president, once as president, and in 2009 as vice president when I first came here. Then back in 2014, I came 3 times in the aftermath of the Revolution of Dignity. And I again came in 2015 to address the Rada about the work of building a strong democracy. And I came in 2017, just before I left office as vice president. I knew I'd be back, but I wanted to be sure. Even though the election were over, Barack and I were out of office, I decided to make one more trip before the next president was sworn in to Kyiv. So President Zelensky, you deeply honor me here in Kyiv with you today, to meet with your military, your intelligence folks, your diplomatic teams, community leaders who have stepped up and helped their country in their hour of need. It's astounding who stood up. Everybody. Everybody. Women, young children, trying to do something, just trying to do something. pulling people out of apartments and being shelled and literally what I think is war crimes. It's astounding. And the whole world sees it and looks at it. This is the largest land war in Europe in 3/4 of a century. And you're succeeding against all and every expectation except your own. We have every confidence that you're going to continue to prevail. You know, from the moment I first received an intelligence report in the fall, about a year ago, we were focused on determining how do we rally the rest of the world. How do I help you with the promise you asked me to make, to rally the world? Well, how do you succeed? How do you get a world to respond to a prosperous economy, a confident democracy, a secure and independent state? When United Americans of all political backgrounds decided that they would step up. American people know it matters. Unchecked aggression is a threat to all of us. We built a coalition of nations from the Atlantic to the Pacific, NATO in the Atlantic, Japan in the Pacific, I mean, across the world. The number of nations stood up over 50. Help Ukraine defend itself with unprecedented military, economic, and humanitarian support. We united the leading economies of the world to impose unprecedented costs that are squeezing Russia's economic lifelines. Together, we've committed nearly 700 tanks and thousands of armored vehicles, 1,000 artillery systems, more than 2 million rounds of artillery ammunition, more than 50 advanced launch rocket systems, anti-ship and air defense systems, all defend Ukraine, and that doesn't count the other $500 million we're announcing with you today and tomorrow. That's going to be coming your way. And that's just the United States in this piece. And just today, that announcement includes artillery ammunition for HIMARS and howitzers, more javelins, anti-armor systems, air surveillance radars to help protect Ukrainian people from aerial bombardments. Later this week, we will announce additional sanctions against elites and companies that are trying to evade sanctions and backfill Russia's war machine. And thanks to bipartisan support in Congress, this week we're delivering billions in direct budgetary support, which the government can put to use immediately and help provide for basic services of citizens. The cost that Ukraine has had to bear has been extraordinarily high, and the sacrifices have been far too great. They've been met, but they've been far too great. We mourn alongside the families of those who've been lost to the brutal and unjust war. We know that there'll be very difficult days and weeks and years ahead. But Russia's aim was to wipe Ukraine off the map. Putin's war of conquest is failing. Russia's military has lost half its territory it once occupied. Young, talented Russians are fleeing by the tens of thousands, not wanting to come back to Russia. Not just fleeing from the military, fleeing from Russia itself, because they see no future in their country. Russia's economy is now a backwater, isolated and struggling. Putin thought Ukraine was weak and the West was divided. As you know, Mr. President, I said to you in the beginning, he's counting on us not sticking together. He was counting on the inability to keep NATO united. He was counting on us not to be able to bring in others. on the side of Ukraine. He thought he could outlast us. I don't think he's thinking that right now. God knows what he's thinking, but I don't think he's thinking that. But he's just been plain wrong. Plain wrong. And 1 year later, the evidence is right here in this room. We stand here together. Mr. President, I'm delighted to be able to repay your visit to our country. In Washington, not long ago, you told the Congress, quote, "We have no fear, nor should anyone in the world have it," end of quote. You and all Ukrainians, Mr. President, remind the world every single day what the meaning of the word courage is. From all sectors of your economy, all walks of life. It's astounding. Astounding. Remind us that freedom is priceless. It's worth fighting for as long as it takes. And that's how long we're going to be with you, Mr. President, for as long as it takes.
We'll do it.
Thank you.
So as we inch closer towards that 1 year mark of Russia's invasion into Ukraine, this is an image that is going to have global ramifications of the US President Joe Biden arriving in Ukraine. We in fact do have with us Ukrainian MP Sofia Feina, who is joining us on the broadcast. We appreciate you taking out the time and joining us here on CNN News 18. I want to first understand that how do you see the visit of US President Joe Biden at a time when we are inching close to that 1 year mark of Russia's invasion to Ukraine?
Thank you for covering the situation. And I would mark the first thing that Joe Biden's visit, it was totally unexpected for Ukrainians, even for MPs. And this is a great sign of support for Ukrainian society and Ukrainian fight against Moscow aggression. This is not only the moment when he said that he is bringing more military help and more sanctions were announced against Moscow Federation, but actually this is a question when the Ukrainian people know that they are not alone in their fight. And as we know, this is also a strong message to all the democratic world, to the Western democracy, first of all, but also for all the countries that do not support tyranny and unprecedented aggression, that they have to unite their efforts to help Ukraine to withstand Moscow aggression and finally to make the Moscow Federation to the responsibility what it did.
Right. Sophia, we'll just request you to stay on with us. We also have our colleague Zaka Jacob now joining us from our newsroom. Zaka?
I think it's a significant visit, the American president standing side by side with the Ukrainian president in the presidential palace. And remember, this was the place that was being bombed exactly a year ago. This is the 1 year anniversary, as it were, since this war began. And I think a lot of things have changed in this last 1 year. People thought that Zelensky would fold, that he would run away, or that he would be eliminated. He's still here. He's standing with the American president, eye to eye, shoulder to shoulder. This message of solidarity is going to ring through capitals around the world. It's going to be very closely followed in Moscow, not the very least, in Beijing, here in Delhi, in London, Paris, wherever it is. Also Biden committing to another additional $500 million of aid to Ukraine. We don't know the details of it, but I think the figure that he used, about 700 tanks being given to Ukraine from different countries, I think that number is staggering in and of itself. Ukraine has been asking for fighter jets. The Western view so far is the fighter jets are not going to help in any way to help for that spring assault that everybody is talking about. I think, if one of the ideas, of course, like I said, as a photo op, as symbolism, this is great. But if one of the ideas behind this visit is also try and put some seeds of doubt in the mind of Vladimir Putin and his Russian generals before that spring offensive, that America's commitment, the West's commitment to Ukraine is unwavering, I think this will definitely sow those seeds of doubt. Ultimately, look, this war has now ground to a stalemate, particularly in the east, in places like Bakhmut, in other places in the Donbass. I think it's very clear that something's got to give. The question is what? I think by reaching Kyiv and by giving this almost unequivocal message of support to Vladimir Zelensky, I think the American president is sort of signaling that we're not going to see any kind of a ceasefire, at least certainly not in terms that are acceptable to Russia anytime soon. This war is only going to end one way, and that is if Putin decides to stop the war, because he's simply not going to be able to achieve a victory, an outright victory, given the current sort of stalemate that we're seeing. Sophia is still with us. Sophia, so in terms of messaging, clearly this is a great photo opportunity. This is full of symbolism. Your president and the president of the United States standing side by side in your presidential palace. But how may this translate on the ground in terms of the war effort? Everybody's talking about this imminent spring offensive. How will this change materially the stalemate that we're seeing on the ground and have seen for the last few weeks now?
First of all, I disagree with you that we do have a stalemate on the Bakhmut and Soledar dimension. Actually, Ukrainian soldiers are keeping the defense against the Moscow aggression, and we are awaiting for the approach of the military help from our Western partners. And I think with this visit, Joe Biden has shown the possibility for us to get as soon as possible everything we need, and especially anti-rocket systems and
All right, we'll try and see if we can connect back with Sofia, the member of parliament from Ukraine. But like I said, the fact that Joe Biden went to the tomb of the fallen soldiers, marked his respects to the Ukrainian soldiers who have died. All right, Sofia is back with us. Yes, continue, please.
Hi, yes, I'm here. If to talk about how it's been perceived on the ground, I might say that I'm sorry, something is going wrong with the internet.
Go on, we can hear you now, yeah.
For the society, very important, as today we have a very symbolical date. 10 years ago in 2014, that was a day of the big losses on the Revolution of Dignity. More than 117 people died just because of the peaceful protests in Kyiv. For all the Ukrainians, this is a day where we mourn together and where we take our strengths to go on with the fight for our democratic land. For military people that are on the ground, it means immediate supplies. And of course, it is the message for Putin that it's better to stop. It's better not to attack Ukraine, as the democratic world is united together to withstand Moscow aggression.
The U.S. president did mention that there's going to be additional $500 million of aid. We don't know, what material form that's going to take. I know the Ukrainian side has been asking for fighter jets. The West hasn't come to a conclusion where fighter jets need to be given to Ukraine at this stage of the war. How do you see the needle of this war itself moving in a significant way in the next few days and weeks? Because, like I said, it seems like it's a stalemate over the last few weeks.
Ukrainian army is growing, and we are taking any effort to get rid of the Moscow occupant on our land. What we are lacking, it's not just a question of jets, because not always we have a possibility to.
All right, I think we've lost that audio line with Sofia. We'll try and see if we can go back, but these are images from. All right, Sofia is back.
This is a symbol for us, everything what we have. We need all the necessary elements for Ukraine, for artillery that we have on the front line. We need the weapon that could be used immediately.
All right, we'll leave it at that. Sofia there, member of parliament from Ukraine. As you see these live pictures of the tribute by the US president and the Ukrainian president reaching the tomb of the fallen soldier. Remember, we don't have an official account of how many Ukrainian soldiers have died, but that number could be well in the thousands since this war began a year ago. So high on symbolism. In terms of substance, $500 million has been committed, but I think the message is very clear, and that's the attempt, or at least that's one of the attempts through this visit. The message to Moscow is clear. that the Western world, America, its European partners, are not giving up on Ukraine just yet. In fact, they're redoubling their support to Ukraine in this one-year week, as it were, of the Ukrainian war, of the Russian invasion into Ukraine. And whether or not that sows the seeds of doubt in Vladimir Putin's mind, and whether or not that may deter him and his forces from launching this imminent spring offensive, we'll wait and see. But I think for now, this is a very, very significant moment in this last 1 year of this war.
And this is a story that we'll continue to track very, very closely. For now, we're slipping into a very short break.
And this photograph, like I said, is going to be pasted all across news media outlets around the world.
Zaka, how does one read this? This is a big development that's coming in from Ukraine. The entire attendance of Joe Biden there.
Oh, it's a huge story. The fact that Joe Biden, the US president, is today in Kyiv. He's meeting with President Vladimir Zelensky of Ukraine, as well as other senior officials. These are the first pictures that we have of him in downtown Kyiv, in central Kyiv. Remember, for the last hour or so in Kyiv, air raid sirens have been going off. That is to indicate that there is a VVIP movement. There are videos doing the rounds of social media as well of his cavalcade passing by downtown Kyiv. We can now confirm Leslia Velenko, who is a senior Ukrainian member of parliament, has confirmed that US President Joe Biden has landed in Kyiv. Remember, he's en route to Poland. He's supposed to go to Warsaw tomorrow. So this is en route to Poland. You can see the first pictures of US President Joe Biden just as we approach the first anniversary of this war. This war was launched on the 24th of February. It's going to be exactly a year by the end of this week. So on the week when Ukrainians will be looking back at this torrid year that it has been for them and for their country, Joe Biden, arguably the world's most powerful man, the world's most powerful politician, landing up in Kyiv, expressing solidarity with the Ukrainian people, expressing solidarity with Vladimir Zelensky's government. Remember, he has led a rather valiant effort to take on a much stronger, much bigger army of Russia and a much bigger leader in Vladimir Putin. So this is a huge message of support from the American president to his Ukrainian counterpart, and also to the Ukrainian people, that America is standing firmly and solidly behind this war effort. This is, of course, as far as Ukraine is concerned, an attempt to try, this is an existential crisis. I mean, if they lose this war, they lose their country. And as the country marks 1 year of this brutal war after having been launched as a special military operation by Vladimir Putin, it is now confirmed, and you can see these pictures of President Joe Biden of the United States walking down central Kyiv. He's meeting with President Zelensky and other senior members of the Ukrainian government. He will be subsequently going to Warsaw tomorrow, but we are expecting a briefing by senior government officials of Ukraine any moment now. In the run-up to this touchdown, as it were, of course, this was a highly secretive visit. It was kept under wraps for a number of days in the run-up to this visit. And even this morning, you know, it is not like information was trickling in either from the US White House administration or from media reports in the US about the possibility of Biden, touching down in Kyiv. But now you can see those live pictures of US President Joe Biden in Kyiv, meeting with Zelensky as well as other senior leaders of the Ukrainian government. He's going to spend a few hours there and then make his way towards Warsaw to Poland, where he's expected to give a major speech tomorrow on this one-year war effort. So clearly, this is a big, big moment. Symbolically, maybe not materially, but definitely symbolically, the fact that the US president is in Kyiv. We've had, the UK Prime Minister, when Boris Johnson was the UK Prime Minister, he had gone to Kyiv. We've seen other leaders, the former Israeli Prime Minister had gone to Kyiv, but we haven't seen the American president go to Kyiv since this war began. So I think it's a significant moment, this, definitely high on optics, high on solidarity, the photographs, the symbolism, that'll be huge. But what may this translate into in terms of material support for Ukraine I think that is something that we'll have to wait and watch out for.
Absolutely. And Zaka, like you rightly said, this is one of the very important, in fact, decisive moments in Joe Biden's presidency. And of course, all eyes will be on that very speech, or the kind of messaging that he sends out to Russia through that speech in Warsaw.
Absolutely. So that was there you can see the still, you can see both Zelensky and Biden. Biden to the right and Zelensky to his left. They are walking down downtown Kyiv is what we've been told. This is a hugely symbolic moment, no doubt about it. Like I said, since this war began, the US president has not touched down in Kyiv. He has now. And the fact that this entire visit was supposed to be to Poland tomorrow, he was supposed to make a big speech there in Poland. But en route to Poland, en route to Warsaw, he's now landed in Kyiv. And it's a significant photographic sort of memory, if you will, or a turn in the road as far as this war is concerned, because it's signaling unequivocal support. I think these images will be on the front pages of all newspapers, from the New York Times to Washington Post. All websites across the world are going to be carrying this. Television channels like CNN News 18 are reporting this. I think it's hugely powerful on symbolism. Materially, will he make any new announcement of further military aid? Remember, the US is committed to the Abrams tanks. That announcement was made just a few weeks ago. The US alone has contributed close to $50 billion in military and non-military aid to Ukraine since this war began. The Europeans have contributed a substantial number as well. So I think this is going to be, again, read in Western capitals, certainly as a message of solidarity. That's how it's going to be perceived in Kyiv as well. But in Moscow, I think Putin is going to be watching this very, very closely as this war grinds into some kind of a stalemate, and people are expecting a spring offensive by Russia. They're expecting an air assault and possibly further ground assaults as well, particularly in eastern Ukraine, where in places like Bakhmut, it seems like the crisis, that this war has ground down into a stalemate. So I think at a time such as this, for Joe Biden to land up in Kyiv, be seen.
Welcome back. Thanks a lot for staying with us. We continue to track the big international story, which is that US President Joe Biden is in Ukraine. He's met President Zelensky. All of this as we inch closer to that one-year mark of Russia's invasion into Ukraine. As we've been pointing out, that this is going to be an image that is going to have massive ramifications and ripples as well. CNN News 18 is the only channel, and we continue to have our colleague Sanjay Suri reporting for us live from Kyiv in Ukraine. Sanjay, as we've been pointing out over the last 1 hour or so, this is an image that goes beyond optics and gestures, and exactly what US President Joe Biden said as well. Don't see this just as US's unwavering support to Ukraine, but this is a larger messaging that 1 year ago, everybody thought that Ukraine would have fallen by now, Kyiv would have been, and story that would have been over. But the opposite has happened. When the US president says this in Ukraine, what is the message that is sent out to Russia?
Well, the first message is that he's saying this from Ukraine. What he says is really an emphatic repeat of what he has said before. And this 500 million is, of course, small in relation to all that the US has done so far, in the range of $28-29 billion worth of weaponry to Ukraine. And there certainly will be more, and there's indication of more. But of course, in Kyiv, he would have had to make some announcement that was almost a formal, a protocol matter. But the fact is that he's underlined his long-term commitment. President Biden said that he has been to Kyiv several times as vice president and in other capacities, that he's very familiar with Ukraine. And this personal commitment, this personal involvement counts. It counts for a lot when decisions like this are taken. Given that long-standing personal involvement and commitment, given the US position, this visit is a very, very strong message to Putin now that the US is going to indeed be with Ukraine all the way, as it always has said. And this visit says that louder than any words could.
Oh, absolutely, Sanjay. And this is being seen as a big turning point as far as this Russia's invasion into Ukraine is concerned. The larger question is, how is Moscow and Russia reading this? Will we see a change of narrative from Russia? Sanjay, we'll continue to come back to you. For now, we're slipping into a very short break, coming back with lots more.
Warsaw tomorrow, but we're expecting a briefing by senior government officials of Ukraine any moment now. In the run-up to this touchdown, as it were, of course, this was a highly secretive visit. It was kept under wraps for a number of days in the run-up to this visit. And even this morning, it is not like information was trickling in either from the U.S. White House administration or from media reports in the U.S. about the possibility of Biden touching down in Kyiv. But now you can see those live pictures of U.S. President Joe Biden in Kyiv, meeting with Zelensky as well as other senior leaders of the Ukrainian government. He's going to spend a few hours there and then make his way towards Warsaw to Poland, where he's expected to give a major speech tomorrow on this one-year war effort. So clearly, this is a big moment. Symbolically, maybe not materially, but definitely symbolically, the fact that the US president is in Kyiv. We've had, the UK Prime Minister, when Boris Johnson was the UK Prime Minister, he had gone to Kyiv. We've seen other leaders, the former Israeli Prime Minister had gone to Kyiv, but we haven't seen the American president go to Kyiv since this war began. So I think it's a significant moment, this, definitely high on optics, high on solidarity, the photographs, the symbolism, that'll be huge. But what may this translate into in terms of material support for Ukraine, I think that is something that we'll have to wait and watch out for.
Absolutely. And Zaka, like you rightly said, this is one of the very important, in fact, decisive moments in Joe Biden's presidency. And of course, all eyes will be on that very speech, or the kind of messaging that he sends out to Russia through that speech in Warsaw.
Absolutely. So that was there you can see the still, you can see both Zelensky and Biden. Biden to the right and Zelensky to his left. They are walking downtown Kyiv is what we've been told. This is a hugely symbolic moment, no doubt about it. Like I said, since this war began, the US president has not touched down in Kyiv. He has now. And the fact that this entire visit was supposed to be to Poland tomorrow, he was supposed to make a big speech there in Poland. But en route to Poland, en route to Warsaw, he's now landed in Kyiv, and it's a significant, photographic sort of memory, if you will, or a turn in the road as far as this war is concerned, because it's signaling unequivocal support. I think these images will be on the front pages of all newspapers, from the New York Times to Washington Post. All websites across the world are going to be carrying this. Television channels like CNN News18 are reporting this. I think it's hugely powerful on symbolism. Materially, will he make any new announcement of further military aid? Remember, the US is committed to the Abrams tanks. That announcement was made just a few weeks ago. The US alone has contributed close to $50 billion in military and non-military aid to Ukraine since this war began. The Europeans have contributed a substantial number as well. So I think this is going to be, again, read in Western capitals, certainly as a message of solidarity. That's how it's going to be perceived in Kyiv as well. But in Moscow, I think Putin is going to be watching this very, very closely as this war grinds into some kind of a stalemate, and people are expecting a spring offensive by Russia. They're expecting an air assault and possibly further ground assaults as well, particularly in eastern Ukraine, where in places like Bakhmut, it seems like the crisis, that this war has ground down into a stalemate. So I think at a time such as this, for Joe Biden to land up in Kyiv, be seen side by side with Zelensky, walk down, some of the main streets there, is conveying an absolutely unequivocal message of support and solidarity with Ukraine. And I think this is a significant moment. It's really high on symbolism, and this photograph, like I said, is going to be pasted all across news media outlets around the world.
Zaka, how does one read this? Is a big development that's coming in from Ukraine. The entire attendance of Joe Biden there.
Oh, it's a huge story. The fact that Joe Biden, the US president, is today in Kyiv. He's meeting with President Vladimir Zelensky of Ukraine, as well as other senior officials. These are the first pictures that we have of him in downtown Kyiv, in central Kyiv. Remember, for the last hour or so in Kyiv, air raid sirens have been going off. That is to indicate that there is a VVIP movement. There are videos doing the rounds of social media as well of his cavalcade passing by downtown Kyiv. We can now confirm Leslia Velenko, who is a senior Ukrainian member of parliament, has confirmed that US President Joe Biden has landed in Kyiv. Remember, he's en route to Poland. He's supposed to go to Warsaw tomorrow. So this is en route to Poland. You can see the first pictures of US President Joe Biden just as we approach the first anniversary of this war. This war was launched on the 24th of February. It's going to be exactly a year by the end of this week. So on the week when Ukrainians will be looking back at this torrid year that it has been for them and for their country, Joe Biden, arguably the world's most powerful man, the world's most powerful politician, landing up in Kyiv, expressing solidarity with the Ukrainian people, expressing solidarity with Vladimir Zelensky's government. Remember, he has led a rather valiant effort to take on a much stronger, much bigger army of Russia and a much bigger leader in Vladimir Putin. So this is a huge message of support from the American president to his Ukrainian counterpart and also to the Ukrainian people, that America is standing firmly and solidly behind this war effort. This is, of course, as far as Ukraine is concerned, an attempt to try, this is an existential crisis. I mean, if they lose this war, they lose their country. And as the country marks 1 year of this brutal war after having been launched as a special military operation by Vladimir Putin, it is now confirmed, and you can see these pictures of President Joe Biden of the United States walking down central Kyiv. He's meeting with President Zelensky and other senior members of the Ukrainian government. He will be subsequently going to Warsaw tomorrow, but we're expecting a briefing by senior government officials of Ukraine any moment now. In the run-up to this touchdown, as it were, of course, this was a highly secretive visit. It was kept under wraps for a number of days in the run-up to this visit. And even this morning, you know, it is not like information was trickling in either from the US White House administration or from media reports in the US about.
Welcome back. Thanks a lot for staying with us. Some breaking developments now coming in. Khalistani separatist leader Amritpal Singh has now issued an open threat to Union Home Minister Amit Shah. He's gone on to say that the Union Home Minister Amit Shah's fate will be similar to Indira Gandhi. Let's listen in.
हिंदुस्तान की हुकूमत सैकुलर हुकूमत है और हिंदुस्तान की हुकूमत चाहती है भी सारिਆਂ ਨੂੰ आज़ादी की गल होवे। ਤੁਸੀਂ ਦੱਸੋ ਮੈਨੂੰ देश के गृह मंत्री ने प्रधानमंत्री ने कदे अज तक ये कहा भी असीं हिंदू राष्ट्र वाले नूं नप्पांगे उत्थे गल बदन नहीं देवांगे। फिर ਇਹਦਾ मतलब है भी फर्क है ना, सिखां दी अपनी इंस्पिरेशन ते हिंदुआं दी इंस्पिरेशन च फर्क है। सिख नहीं कर सकते, हिंदू अपना एक सुपना लै सकते। सो मैनूं ਇਹ लगता भी नप्पिया नप्पिया कुछ नहीं नप्पिया जाता हुंदा। इंदिरा गांधी ने नप के देख लिया सी की नतीजा निकलिया, ये भी करके वेख लैण जो फिर वो चाह पूरा करने वाली गल है कर लेना। असीं ते सीस तली ते धर के तुरे हाँ, सानूं जे मौत दा भै होवे ते असीं इन्हां राहां ते तुरीए ही ना। तो जिहड़ा गृह मंत्री वो अपना चाह पूरा करके वेख।
Let's also now bring in our colleague Pankaj Kapai, who in fact has been tracking these developments for us. Pankaj, ये काफी open threat है जो खालिस्तानी सेपरेटिस्ट लीडर अमृतपाल सिंह ने ऑन कैमरा दिया है। दो चीजें जो मैं आपसे समझना चाहती हूँ, पहला इसका बेटर कॉन्टेक्स्ट दीजिए कि कहाँ पर ये कमेंट दिया गया है और अभी तक कोई पॉलिटिकल रिएक्शंस आए हैं क्या?
देखिए, क्योंकि ये बयान जो है अमृतपाल सिंह की तरफ से कल दिया गया है मोगा में एक जगह पर इकट्ठ जो है वो अमृतपाल सिंह की तरफ से किया गया था। और क्योंकि अमृतपाल सिंह के एक साथी को गिरफ्तार जो है वो किया गया है किडनैपिंग के मामले को लेकर, और इसलिए अमृतपाल सिंह ने इकट्ठ जो है वो किया था और ये कहा कि अगर पुलिस मुझे पकड़ना चाहती है तो पकड़ ले। और वहीं दूसरी तरफ अमृतपाल सिंह उन्होंने एक बड़ी अहम स्टेटमेंट दी, बड़ा बयान जो उनकी तरफ से दिया गया। उन्होंने कहा कि मैं मरने के लिए तैयार हूं, मैं शहादत देने के लिए तैयार हूं, मैं बुरा होकर नहीं मरना चाहता। अगर मुझे अपनी कौम के लिए कुर्बानी देने की जरूरत पड़ी तो मैं उसके लिए पूरी तरह से तैयार हूं। और वो दूसरे लोगों को भी बोला कि आप इस तरह से तैयार रहिए, क्योंकि लगातार ये चर्चा चलती रहती है कि खालिस्तान समर्थक जो हैं अमृतपाल सिंह वो लगातार जो है इस तरह के बयान देने में लगे हुए हैं। और ऐसे में पंजाब पुलिस की तरफ से जब उनके एक साथी को गिरफ्तार किया गया तो उसके विरोध में एक प्रदर्शन, एक जो इकट्ठ है वो अमृतपाल सिंह की तरफ से पंजाब के मोगा में
पंकज जी हमारे लिए ये स्टोरी आप ट्रैक करते रहिए, अगर कोई रिएक्शंस आता है तो भी we'll get it to our viewers. Unfortunately, we'll have to leave that conversation there. With that, it's a wrap from my side. Slipping into a very short break, but news continues here on CNN News 18.
And possibly further ground assaults as well, particularly in eastern Ukraine, where in places like Bakhmut, it seems like the crisis, that this war has ground down into a stalemate. So I think at a time such as this, for Joe Biden to land up in Kyiv, be seen side by side with Zelensky, walk down, some of the main streets there, is conveying an absolutely unequivocal message of support and solidarity with Ukraine. And I think this is a significant moment. It's really high on symbolism, and this photograph, like I said, is going to be pasted all across news media outlets around the world.
Zaka, how does one read this? Is a big development that's coming in from Ukraine. The entire attendance of Joe Biden there.
Oh, it's a huge story. The fact that Joe Biden, the US president, is today in Kyiv. He's meeting with President Vladimir Zelensky of Ukraine, as well as other senior officials. These are the first pictures that we have of him in downtown Kyiv, in central Kyiv. Remember, for the last hour or so in Kyiv, air raid sirens have been going off. That is to indicate that there is a VVIP movement. There are videos doing the rounds of social media as well of his cavalcade passing by downtown Kyiv. We can now confirm Leslia Velenko, who is a senior Ukrainian member of parliament, has confirmed that US President Joe Biden has landed in Kyiv. Remember, he's en route to Poland. He's supposed to go to Warsaw tomorrow. So this is en route to Poland. You can see the first pictures of US President Joe Biden just as we approach the first anniversary of this war. This war was launched on the 24th of February. It's going to be exactly a year by the end of this week. So on the week when Ukrainians will be looking back at this torrid year that it has been for them and for their country, Joe Biden, arguably the world's most powerful man, the world's most powerful politician, landing up in Kyiv, expressing solidarity with the Ukrainian people, expressing solidarity with Vladimir Zelensky's government. Remember, he has led a rather valiant effort to take on a much stronger, much bigger army of Russia and a much bigger leader in Vladimir Putin. So this is a huge message of support from the American president to his Ukrainian counterpart, and also to the Ukrainian people, that America is standing firmly and solidly behind this war effort. This is, of course, as far as Ukraine is concerned, an attempt to try, this is an existential crisis. I mean, if they lose this war, they lose their country. And as the country marks 1 year of this brutal war after having been launched as a special military operation by Vladimir Putin, it is now confirmed, and you can see these pictures of President Joe Biden of the United States walking down central Kyiv. He's meeting with President Zelensky and other senior members of the Ukrainian government. He will be subsequently going to Warsaw tomorrow, but we're expecting a briefing by senior government officials of Ukraine any moment now. In the run-up to this touchdown, as it were, of course, this was a highly secretive visit. It was kept under wraps for a number of days in the run-up to this visit. And even this morning, it is not like information was trickling in either from the US White House administration or from media reports in the US about the possibility of Biden, touching down in Kyiv. But now you can see those live pictures of US President Joe Biden in Kyiv, meeting with Zelensky as well as other senior leaders of the Ukrainian government. He's going to spend a few hours there and then make his way towards Warsaw to Poland, where he's expected to give a major speech tomorrow on this one-year war effort. So clearly, this is a big, big moment. Symbolically, maybe not materially, but definitely symbolically, the fact that the US president is in Kyiv. We've had, the UK Prime Minister, when Boris Johnson was the UK Prime Minister, he had gone to Kyiv. We've seen other leaders, the former Israeli Prime Minister had gone to Kyiv, but we haven't seen the American president go to Kyiv since this war began. So I think it's a significant moment, this, definitely high on optics, high on solidarity, the photographs, the symbolism, that'll be huge. But what may this translate into in terms of material support for Ukraine, I think that is something that we'll have to wait and watch out for.
Absolutely. And Zaka, like you rightly said, this is one of the very important, in fact, decisive moments in Joe Biden's presidency. And of course, all eyes will be on that very speech, or the kind of messaging that he sends out to Russia through that speech in Warsaw.
Absolutely. So that was there you can see the still, you can see both Zelensky and Biden. Biden to the right and Zelensky to his left. They are walking down downtown Kyiv is what we've been told. This is a hugely symbolic moment, no doubt about it. Like I said, since this war began, the US president has not touched down in Kyiv. He has now. And the fact that this entire visit was supposed to be to Poland tomorrow, he was supposed to make a big speech there in Poland. But en route to Poland, en route to Warsaw, he's now landed in Kyiv. And it's a significant photographic sort of memory, if you will, or a turn in the road as far as this war is concerned, because it's signaling unequivocal support. I think these images will be on the front pages of all newspapers, from the New York Times to Washington Post. All websites across the world are going to be carrying this. Television channels like CNN News 18 are reporting this. I think it's hugely powerful on symbolism. Materially, will he make any new announcement of further military aid? Remember, the US is committed to the Abrams tanks. That announcement was made just a few weeks ago. The US alone has contributed close to $50 billion in military and non-military aid to Ukraine since this war began. The Europeans have contributed a substantial number as well. So I think this is going to be, again, read in Western capitals, certainly as a message of solidarity. That's how it's going to be perceived in Kyiv as well. But in Moscow.
Good evening, hello and welcome. You're watching CNN News 18. This is Nation at 5 with me, Poonam Burde. Let's get you started on this edition with news coming in from our neighborhood, and that's from Pakistan, where emotions are running high as Imran Khan, the former Prime Minister and chief of the PTI, looks at an imminent arrest. We're given to understand that Imran Khan has now told the Lahore High Court that he will appear before them by 5:30 p.m. Indian Standard Time, which is in about half an hour from now. Remember, his bail was dismissed. He faces arrest. He was asked by the Lahore High Court to be physically present before them for the hearing. It was supposed to happen at 2 p.m., but Imran Khan failed to appear. Now we're given to understand that Imran Khan has informed the Lahore High Court that in another 30 minutes he is going to be there. There's already high drama that is expected. Hundreds of supporters of Imran Khan of the PTI outside Lahore High Court in a show of support. Abhishek, my colleague, is now joining me for more on this. Abhishek, Imran Khan faces arrest. It's expected to happen any time after that court hearing.
So what happened has Poonam, that on Wednesday, Imran Khan's bail plea was rejected, and despite his lawyers pleading that there can be one-time exemption because he's still recovering from his injuries of recent times when he was shot, bullets were fired on him, the court did not accept that logic and asked him to present physically. So today also he was not willing to go in person to the court. 2 p.m. was the time when he was expected to reach the court, but then his lawyer has again pleaded that there are security issues, there are a crowd which is not letting him come to the court very safely. So there could be some delay. So we'll have to see what sort of cognizance court takes when Imran Khan will be present in person, whether court will allow him to be be on the bail, or the bail period will be extended, or will he be arrested as per the direction of the court.
Right, which is why we're already seeing a show of strength outside the Lahore High Court. There, several supporters of Imran Khan of the PTI have already gathered there. Perhaps stage is set for a showdown if Imran Khan is arrested at the end of that hearing.
It could be very well possible, but then we know the kind of law and order situation it will create, because on Wednesday also, the Zaman Park, the posh colony of Lahore where Imran Khan resides, that was full of thousands of PTI supporters who were camping outside the residence of Imran Khan just to avoid any possible attempt by the state machinery to arrest their leader. Even today, there is a huge gathering of PTI supporters and Imran Khan fans who are outside the Lahore court, and when he will be present in person in the court, and if the direction comes by the court that Imran Khan should be arrested, what sort of reaction this crowd will give, what sort of law and order situation that will create, that is going to be a major challenge, because we have been reporting that law authorities are trying to ensure maximum security in that zone. Many forces, additional forces and backup have been called just to ensure that there is no chaos, there are no, anarchy in the state where it is any adverse judgments as per the wishes of the people or the PTI supporters come from the place.
Right, just to put this in perspective for our viewers, Abhishek, and just to refresh memories of what exactly is transpiring there in Pakistan, is that Imran Khan is accused of receiving foreign funds. It's the prohibited funding case in which he was denied bail, in which he faces arrest today. And in that case, it was alleged that Imran Khan and his aides violated the Foreign Exchange Act. The allegation was first made back in 2014. But in 2022, which is last year, a report claimed that there was gross funding violations within the PTI, and that's the investigation that Imran Khan faces.